We hate you here. You don't belong here. You don't get to sit with us. I don't like you. Like, that's what they're saying, essentially.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs, the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the toast, Right Toast here, talking about Five Nights at Freddy's, as we always do. Today's topic, I wanted kind of to talk about a transitional time in the FNAF timeline, mainly because it's coming up in my actual timeline that I'm making, and I wanted to kind of use this as an opportunity to brainstorm a bit and try to see if I can think of any particulars that I wasn't thinking of previously. And specifically, the time of the timeline I want to talk about is the FNAF 6 fire and what happens between that and Help Wanted. So let's kind of get into it. I guess for those of you who maybe don't know, I feel like most people do at this point. At least if you're watching episode 33 of a FNAF podcast, you probably do. But when I say the FNAF 6 fire, I'm talking about the end of Freddy Fazbear Pizzaria Simulator, where Henry essentially traps in everybody who's still an active player in the FNAF story into his building designed to do this and burns it all up, pretty much melting everybody into nothingness, trying to end everything so everything can be forgotten and the world can move on. And so who does that include? Well, we know for a fact Henry's there. He says as much. He says, I'm staying here as well. We're pretty certain that the player is Michael Afton. And the reasons for that being, one, it just makes sense that Michael Afton would be there. We know that Michael Afton was seeking out William. William and Molten Freddy seem to have voice lines that indicate they recognize us and they're surprised that we're here. Henry himself is like, I didn't intend this for you and I planned an escape route, but I have a feeling you want to be here. And to me, that's like, I intended some random schmo to come in and help out and then they could have escaped and lived their life. But since you're here, I assume you don't want to leave. So let's all burn together. And then the four main animatronics, right? We have Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, and Lefty. Which Scrap Trap is actually just William Afton after the events of FNAF 3 and whatever happens between 3 and 6. Scrap Baby is Circus Baby after she splits off from Ennard post-sister location. Molten Freddy is the rest of that, so it's Ennard that splits into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy. That's nearly confirmed. And Molten Freddy seems to have the Spirits of the Missing Child incident in it. That's not confirmed. That's speculation. But it does seem very likely that Molten Freddy is an amalgamation of many different things, that being probably the Missing Child incident victims. And then finally Lefty, that from the blueprints and the merchandise of this character and the reoccurrences of this character, we're pretty certain that Lefty was specifically created to find the marionette and capture it. And so when we burn Lefty, we're burning the marionette who is inside of Lefty. So is that the answer? FNAF 6 happens, all of these characters burn, all of them are off the playing field from here on out. I kind of hoped so, and so did most of the fandom, but there is some issues with that. So we know that at least of the Scott-made games, 2 games most likely take place after FNAF 6, that being Ultimate Custom Night and FNAF World. Ultimate Custom Night is a definite. I feel like most people agree Ultimate Custom Night happens after FNAF 6, and essentially it's the vengeful spirit, whoever you think that may be, keeping William in the mortal plane, in William's own memories, refusing to let William die, and trapping William in this tailor-made, never-ending nightmare where he is assaulted and attacked by every horrible thing that he's done. So it's kind of like using from... Now, the specifics are not in the games. The specifics are implied in the games. If you want specifics on how something like Ultimate Custom Night can work, you have to look at Fazbear Frights. Fazbear Frights, whether or not you believe they are in the same continuity of the games, give us a pretty direct explanation for something like Ultimate Custom Night. In the books, a spirit named Andrew is literally shown to be a consciousness within the brain of William Afton, keeping him alive and using his own memories against him, most likely because of the agony that Andrew has. So essentially, we see in the Fazbear Frights books that agony is able to select and amplify negative memories and trap people within them. Whereas Counterpoint, Remnant, as a mirrored effect, is able to connect to and amplify positive memories to help people find peace. So Andrew in the Fazbear Frights is doing the opposite of that to William Afton to torture him for as long as he can because he really, really hates William Afton. So Ultimate Custom Night in the games is just that. It's a vengeful spirit using the memory of themselves and William Afton to trap William in this never-ending torment as long as they feasibly can, just as a final fuck you to William Afton. FNAF World is a lot less certain in its placement. I'm almost certain that FNAF World takes place simultaneously to Ultimate Custom Night. I think it makes the most sense. One, FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night are connected. We're not sure exactly how or why, but it is a fact that if you do the Old Man Consequences Easter egg in Ultimate Custom Night, and then the game crashes, when you open FNAF World, you have the achievement for Old Man Consequences, even if you haven't gotten it in FNAF World. It unlocks it in that game. So they are connected, one, literally, but two, it seems to me that FNAF World is someone's attempt to help as many souls as possible, and specifically the crying child, because it seems like the crying child cannot move on. So why is that? I think Alone Together is giving us that explanation. In Alone Together, there's that whole thing about how as long as someone's remains go undiscovered, they cannot move on. They are a lost soul. They don't have much of their memories. They don't really know what's going on, and somebody needs to find their remains. If the crying child is that buried body in the middle of the woods from Midnight Motorist, like that lump in the woods, if that is an unmarked grave of the crying child, then the crying child wouldn't be able to move on because their body is hidden in the woods somewhere. Literally, in Alone Together, the example the grandmother gives is that on the land their family owned, there was a spirit who was buried there and her body was never found. So she needed someone to find her body. That was in the middle of like a field. And this is pretty close to what we see in Midnight Motorist. So, and I've made a theory about this before, but I connect that to FNAF World, where the Keys ending, when you follow the clocks and you do all the secret stuff, the ending of that game is you go into the middle of the woods and find like one extra thing. You do that and suddenly game ends and we get the cutscene of just like, hey, you'll be okay, rest now. And it's trying to help someone move on. So I think FNAF World is one, trying to find the crying child's corpse so that he can move on. And two, trying to help as many people as possible because there's a lot of people involved in FNAF World. So I connect FNAF World to the end of the epilogues from Fazbear Frights, where Jake, while still in the Stitch Wraith and having almost no agony left on his body, presumably the rest of him is remnant, he goes to the Into the Pit ball pit, which is filled with agony and memory and souls of just many, many victims. And he kind of just collapses into it and uses that idea that he did earlier where he reached into someone's memories and amplified the positive ones so they could find peace. And he does that for Millie, one of the victims from Count the Ways, I believe. And then he does that for, and it's presumed that he's doing it for all the victims in that ball pit. And his final act is just helping these people not necessarily move on, but find peace so they can rest. And I think that's what FNAF World is. I think that's what Charlie is doing post FNAF 6. Because in Ultimate Custom Night, there's a lot of death lines. And a lot of them are just like, hell yeah, we get to beat you up, William. We hate you. We hate your ass. We hate you here. You don't belong here. You don't get to sit with us. I don't like you. Die. Like, that's what they're saying, essentially. But the puppet specifically doesn't. The puppet literally says, I don't hate you, but you need to stay out of my way. And like, I'm not afraid of you anymore, and things like that. So it's like, okay, if the puppet needs William to stay out of its way, Charlie needs William to stay out of her way, what is Charlie doing? What is William in the way of? And I think that's helping the spirits move on. So I think FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night take place at the same time post FNAF 6. I think that makes the most sense. So that being said, that to the side. Who's still there after the fire, if anyone? That depends on what you believe. So it really comes down to, do you believe Fazbear Frights, the stories, are in the game's continuity? Because if you do, they give us the answer to that. Where after the FNAF 6 fire, William's body is retrieved, and then explodes onto several different Fazbear pieces of like technology and memorabilia, they all get possessed with William's agony, and then the rest of the epilogues and the Fazbear Fright stories happen. At the end of that, William turns into an amalgamation, is destroyed and thrown into a lake essentially, and then the remaining players either get like killed or die on their own and move on, and everyone's gone, and Help Wanted Security Breach start fresh with just like the Mimic program and nothing else. That is a possibility. I personally do not see Fazbear Frights being in the same continuity as the games. And that's mainly because my main reason for that is I'm very, very, like, I really do think that Burn Trap is William Afton's corpse, right? One, I think Burn Trap is real, which some people argue against, and fair, because in Ruin we get the comics that Gregory makes, and it's the other endings of Security Breach. The only one he didn't make was Princess Quest, so it's like, okay, maybe Princess Quest is canon. But he makes a comic of the Burn Trap ending, so people think, okay, is Burn Trap just an imagination of what Gregory thinks is down there, and it's not actually real? I don't think that's true. In fact, counter argument, I think that comic page is explicitly telling us Burn Trap is real. The main reason being the fact that we see the Tangle at the beginning of Ruin. So quick. The file name for the blob in Ruin is the Tangle. So a lot of people believe that's its canon name because the character encyclopedia specifically stated Burn Trap and the blob are not the canon names for those characters. It's the only one of the entire book that is used. So the Tangle is seen at the beginning of Ruin. Like, as you're going down the steps, you see the Tangle on the wall for a moment, and then it sees Cassie and it runs away. In that same comic drawing that Gregory made, he draws the Tangle, and it looks just like again, it's a drawing, but it's very accurate to how the Tangle looks. So if in a drawing, he accurately portrayed exactly what the Tangle looks like, and then drew Burn Trap next to it, if anything, that cameo of the Tangle and this comic page is explicitly saying that Burn Trap is real and Gregory did see it. So Burn Trap, in my opinion, has to be real. The question then becomes, okay, what is Burn Trap? And there's a couple explanations for that, right? There's the explanation that I believe that it is the remains of William Afton post FNAF 6 that have been being actively repaired by Vanessa with agony or remnant or whatever have you. There's the explanation that it's the Mimic and a body has been grafted to it. It's possible. But another key detail here is it almost seems like Burn Trap is growing, right? A lot of the flesh seems to be coming from Burn Trap itself, and the model is like 8 feet tall. It is huge. So some people believe that Burn Trap is in some way or fully an agony monster, like a being of agony. So in Into the Pit, Spring Bonnie is kind of the main antagonist of the latter half of the story. And you can see this in the Into the Pit game trailer. It looks like Spring Bonnie's suit, but it's got like rows of teeth and fleshy bits to it. It's pretty clear that in Into the Pit, that Spring Bonnie's suit, whether or not the suit is real, which it may be, is primarily possessed by agony. And the fleshy, creaturey bits of that agony is what's like, it's made of agony. The teeth come from the agony. The fleshy bits come from the agony. So there's a possibility that Burn Trap is the same way, where there may or may not be an actual suit there, but it is a collection of most likely William's agony given like a physical form, a manifestation of agony. And that could be applied to the Mimic, and maybe it is the Mimic, but then when the agony is removed, it goes back to what it looked like. There's a lot of explanations there. I personally think the thing that makes the most sense is it's Scrap Trap post FNAF 6, William Afton's corpse, but now all the remnant has been burned away, and it's just this already terrible thing filled with agony. So it is growing and somewhat getting a little larger, and flesh is appearing on the body, but that's because of agony. Here's where I get stuck, and here's why I don't think Fazbear Frights is in the continuity. I said this on Twitter, but I said it poorly, and I got rightfully roasted for it, where I was like, okay, if Fazbear Frights is canon, like, how did William Afton get out of FNAF 6. And a lot of people are like, this guy doesn't remember about firefighters. I'm like, yeah. I talked about this on a whole podcast a while ago, like a week or two ago. And like, I get it. But to me, the only explanation, and this might just be me being not aware of what the arguments are, so feel free to correct me. I don't know what the argument here is. But if the Fazbear Frights books are meant to be in continuity, then post FNAF 6, the FNAF 6 fire alerts the local authorities, firefighters, paramedics, they rush to the scene, and the only body that they can find that seems to be at all breathing is William Afton, who at that moment is like burned and scorched and fused to the Spring Bonnie suit. So they somehow remove his body from the Spring Bonnie suit and either leave it there or bring it with them, it's unclear, and take that corpse to a hospital. It's still somehow breathing, so they'll bring it to a hospital. And then sometime later, that FNAF 6 building sinks into the ground. And because the Pizzaplex has to be built on top of it. So probably from the fire damage, it's built on an unstable ground, who knows? It sinks into the ground, Pizzaplex is built on top of it. And then Vanny and GGY tunnel into the FNAF 6 area, and they either find the Spring Bonnie suit that was left there by the paramedics, or they have to make a new suit, and then they fuse some random corpse to it, or the agony in the area just starts putting more fleshy bits onto it, and they start making that. But if it is self-created, why would they need to be charging it in a charging pod? I feel like there's a lot of steps here that don't need to happen. Because if Fazbear Frights are not in continuity, then that means Henry, who specifically built the Pizzeria Simulator to burn everything and be lost to time and forgotten, would have built a building that can internally burn everything down, but externally not show any signs of that, so as to not alert the local firefighters who may put out the fire and save someone inside. He wants everyone to die, and they're in these metal rooms. He wants it to burn internally. Then the building collapses, Pizzaplex is built. When Vanny and GGY burrow down there, they find William Afton's corpse and begin trying to repair it in some way, so Glitchtrap has a vessel. I think that makes more sense. I think it's way easier explained that way. I think it makes way more sense. So with that interpretation, where do I think everyone else is after the fire? So I think the most likely explanation for Burn Trap is it is Afton's agony possessing the remains of him after FNAF 6 and growing into this new horrid beast. I don't think any of William's remnant is in there. His consciousness is probably there because agony does kind of carry a consciousness in a way. Not really. It's more... The books like kind of go into the idea that agony needs a consciousness to like form into something. But like sometimes it feels as though it has a consciousness, like with Andrew, for example. Maybe the suit itself and William's brain is enough. Who knows? So then what is the Tangle? I have a feeling the Tangle is just the rest of the agony in this area, possibly with additional victims later on, amassing into one just massive beast. And I like the interpretation. I forget if it was a commenter or a podcast question. Somebody brought up the idea that the Tangle is Ultimate Custom Night. And like, as so long as William is a part of it, he is stuck in Ultimate Custom Night. So when he's retrieved and being repaired, the Tangle is trying to get William back. And that's why in the Burn Trap ending, the Tangle sees William and scoops him up. It puts him right back into Ultimate Custom Night. Which does explain where Burn Trap is in Ruin. So in Ruin, Burn Trap's pod is there, but it's empty. And the Tangle is skedaddling. I wonder if the Burn Trap ending does happen in Security Breach, and we get to Ruin, the Tangle scooped up William, put it back inside itself, leaves Burn Trap in there to stay in Ultimate Custom Night, and leaves to somewhere that is less busy and less disturbed. So it's trying somewhere else to hide William Afton to continue Ultimate Custom Nighting him. I think that's very possible. And that explains why Burn Trap is gone, and now the only thing left there is the Mimic. Why is the Mimic there? I don't know. It's an old piece of Fazbear tech in the basement of what is probably was originally Fredbear's. That's my only guess. So where's Michael Afton in all of this? I think he's most likely pretty definitely dead. I have seen explanations that if Michael survived the FNAF 6 fire, it's because his body was most likely injected with some form of remnant from the scooper. And we know the remnant has healing properties. So I could see that. Like if Michael's consciousness somehow survived, maybe it's because his body has remnant in it. I think Michael's dead. And similarly, I think Henry's dead. I think Henry is super dead. Well, kind of. We'll get to Henry in the next part. Elizabeth is another one where, like, technically, because she's in Scrap Baby, you could argue Elizabeth is still around the same way William is, or the same way Molten Freddy is as the Tangle. But I don't see the problem with Elizabeth is I feel like you can carry over the logic for William and Molten Freddy into Tangle to Elizabeth. Like if these two survived, why did Scrap Baby not survive? But at the same time, I don't see any evidence of Elizabeth still being around by the time of Help Wanted security breach. So like, I just don't see a reason to argue that Elizabeth is still around. So I feel like she's dead, unless we get some example of her presence still being around. I feel like Elizabeth gone, which then leaves the marionette. I've brought this up before. On one hand, I feel like the marionette and Henry burned, gone, dead. Like Charlotte stays around for FNAF World for a bit. But once those bodies are helped, she leaves as well. But it is worth noting that in FNAF 6, we only ever see Molten Freddy, Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby burn. We only see those three burn. We never see Lefty burn. And then in Ruin and Security Breach, both times when we go through those rooms of FNAF 6, we only see 3 rooms with burners in them. We only ever see 3 burner rooms. Now, there very well could be a 4th one we don't see, but then in the Security Breach Burn Trap boss fight, there are only 3 buttons to turn on burners. So if this is like the room Henry was in activating these burners, why is there only 3? So I think it is possible that Henry stayed alive and went against his word because he wanted to try to save Charlie. We know from the books that at least in the Silver Eyes continuity, Henry is willing to do anything to save Charlie. He goes crazy trying to remake Charlie. So if Henry from the games is anything like Henry from the books, and he knows that Charlotte's soul is intact in the marionette, I could totally see, especially a Henry that knew about the scooper, right? Because he's got the blueprints for the scooper and knows that it was built to take a soul out of one thing and put it into another. I could see Henry staying behind and knowing that he has Charlotte's soul here, trying to make a perfect vessel for Charlotte so he could use the scooper or make a new one to take Charlotte's soul out of the marionette and put it into something else. Does he do this? Probably not. I don't see a huge reason for him to actually pull this off. But I do see this as a possibility for him and the marionette staying alive longer than FNAF 6. Are they still around by Security Breach? I really don't think so. I don't see a reason for Henry to still be alive at the time of Security Breach. And likewise, besides the Nightmare owned plushes, and even that's kind of a stretch, I don't see a reason for Charlie to be alive either. I just don't see it being likely. If Charlotte is still around, I wouldn't know where she is. Maybe she's in the technology of the Pizzaplex. I don't know. I really don't. But it's interesting to consider that. Not to mention FNAF 6, or Help Wanted 2, right? Help Wanted 2 is in a very nebulous state. But we know that the player of Help Wanted 2 practices repairing Helpy in the FNAF 6 location. Pork Patch is there, no idea why, but so is Lefty and Scrap Baby, and they're not burnt, which is weird. So, does that take place before FNAF 6 finishes? Maybe. Are they still around? Maybe? I'm not sure. Because the other wrench in all of this is Help Wanted, and the idea that FNAF 1 through 6 are the indie games in universe. Because then Scrap Baby has a reason to exist. She's a franchisable, marketable character of the Fazbear brand. That's why she's here. I just realized I never turned on my middle light. Oops, if I was really dark that whole time, that's why. So I don't know. Because then it's like, okay, well then did any of the FNAF 6 fire happen? I do think yes, because like Help Wanted establishes 2 things, and people get caught up on the first one. Because Help Wanted is like, oh, Fazbear hired an indie developer to make games based on the stories about Fazbear to make them seem illogical and untrue to cover it up. Um, and a lot of people heard that and went, oh, everything before Help Wanted is fake. We have to start over. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think that's true. Also, shout out April making her first podcast appearance from just laying in the background. I just noticed. Look at that little girl. She is a rescue. She hates being held. Absolutely hates it. It terrifies her. So I don't hold her. So she'll never be in a main channel video because she doesn't like being held. But look at that pretty little kitty. Anyway, I got so distracted by that. What was I saying? Right. So Help Wanted 1 kind of goes into the idea of like, oh, FNAF 1 through 6 is fake. That's not true. That's not what Help Wanted 1 is saying. Because immediately after that, she follows up with, everything was real. These games are based off of real events that did happen, and that's why it's a cover-up. So I do think that FNAF 1 through 6 exist in universe as indie games, but I think they're basically true. It's just maybe some things are inaccurate. And the reason why I lumped 5 and 6 there, right? Because there's a Tales from the Pizza Box story, Help Wanted, that pretty much goes into the idea that 1 through 3 were made and were completed, and halfway through making FNAF 4, the indie developer is killed. So a lot of people are like, okay, 1 through 3 and some of 4. And that does line up with Help Wanted, where 1 through 3 are named minigames in Help Wanted, and then some of the levels of FNAF 4 appear. That lines up. However, in Help Wanted, Ennard appears. Scrap Baby plushes appear. Scrap Baby as a character appears in Help Wanted 2. So 1 through 6, so that would include like Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. Because, I mean, Sister Location, sure, Circus Baby and the gang, they are franchisable, marketable characters. Ennard is not. Ennard specifically is an amalgamation that only Michael should have saw. So the fact that Ennard is in Help Wanted and a cutout in Security Breach imply that it's a marketable character, meaning Sister Location probably is an in-universe indie game. And the same thing can be said for FNAF 6. Not to mention, in one of the Tales from the Pizza Box stories, Pizzeria Simulator is name dropped as a game. So if FNAF 6 is a in-universe indie game, does the fire matter anymore? I think so. I think the only inaccuracies of FNAF 6 that may occur are design. Because realistically, Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy and Scrap Trap and all them, most likely nobody saw them before the fire, outside of Henry and Michael, who are both dead. So that was probably what the indie dev thought they looked like, which could explain why Scrap Trap looks so different than Burn Trap. Maybe it did look closer to Burn Trap in the actuality of that game, but the indie developer was guessing with what he had available to him. It's unclear. That being said, who do I think is still around after FNAF 6? I think Burn Trap is the agony remains of William Afton. I think the Tangle is the collection of all the other agony at the location, and Charlie and Henry may have survived for some time after if Henry was trying to save Charlie, but I think by the time of Security Breach, the rest of them are gone. I think that makes the most sense. So yeah, I guess we'll move on to questions. You know, it's getting close to a half hour. Hopefully this is another too short of a podcast episode. I'm just, I can only yap so much. But if you want your questions or theories answered on the podcast, feel free to send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description. You can copy and paste it because it's a pain to type. Our first question comes from Jack, he, him. What's your opinion on Glamrock Freddy and Roxy? Do you think they are possessed? I'm just not sure how to explain their empathetic and self-aware personalities. How else does Freddy still function without his body? And how does Roxy still activate even after being deactivated and underneath a forklift in ruin? Thank you for your question. So I've talked about Glamrock Freddy a bunch. Roxy is interesting here. I think it's a similar reason. So the one thing I've never touched on, how does Glamrock Freddy continue working if he's just a head? I mean, I feel like the simple answer is his programming is within his head. That's my guess anyway. But I've said several times, I just don't see a compelling enough reason for Glamrock Freddy to be possessed. And that reason kind of doubles down with Roxy. So Roxy, I see what you mean that like halfway through, it seems like she's becoming self-aware. And she's like the one time she tries to grab Cassie and Ruin, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, error," and like seems genuinely confused. And it's like, okay, is that a soul speaking? No, I think it's Roxy's programming fighting back against the glitch trap virus. I think Roxy, after her recognition somehow realizes she's harming a child that she knows, it kind of snaps Roxy's programming out of the glitch trap infection and back into what it should be. And then that's why in the end of Ruin, when we are deactivating the security node of Roxy, I don't think Roxy is the security node. I think Glitch Trap is aware that Roxy is broken out of Glitch Trap's control, just like Glamrock Freddy did. So Glitch Trap is having us deactivate Roxy to take her off the table, remove that support line. So that's what I think is going on. And that's why Roxy is seemingly empathetic and self-aware, is because she broke out of Glitch Trap's control. I think that's genuinely what these animatronics were supposed to act like caring companions. That's their AI programming. But because of the Glitch Trap infection, they don't act like that. So I don't think it's possession that's taking over Roxy. I think it's freedom of Glitch Trap's influence, and that's that sudden shift. I think that makes a lot more sense. Now, as far as how does Roxy save us from the basement after she is deactivated underneath a forklift, I have no idea. If I had to guess, we know that Freddy crashes on stage and then he reboots in safe mode, free of Glitch Trap's control. There's a possibility that when we deactivated Roxy, a similar thing happened. Because think about what we did for Sun and Moon. When we deactivate them, they reboot and they're fixed now. Now they're eclipsed, they're all better. So when we deactivated Roxy, it might have automatically triggered that rebooting process. Now we leave before that happens. We deactivate Roxy, looks like she's deactivated, we leave. Probably soon after that, reboots, I'm awake, Glitch Trap's gone, I'm under a forklift, let me lift this. And get out and go find out what's going on. And that's how she finds Cassie. That's definitely possible. I think that's the most likely explanation. I at least think it's much more likely than we deactivate Roxy and a spirit possesses Roxy and compels her to continue trying to help Cassie. I think the rebooting answer makes more sense, especially since that rebooting thing happens earlier in the game, most likely as a way to foreshadow and inform us about how that can work. But thank you for your question, Jack. Our next question comes from Sabbath, he, him. In the Silver Eyes trilogy, we know that Charlotte Emily has a brother named Sammy Emily. Even if there's no proof of this, do you think there's a possibility of Sammy being in the games? Even if he doesn't have a huge role in the books, I think having a counterpart in a new era of FNAF could be cool. Imagine if he's the new CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. Well, thank you for your question, Sabbath. So you're right. There's no evidence whatsoever of Sammy Emily existing in the games. So for anyone who doesn't know, because it's kind of a side note, in the Silver Eyes, Charlotte does have a twin brother named Sammy. And for a while, until Charlotte knows what actually happened to her, she believes Sammy is the one that William kidnaps and kills. However, it's revealed much later on that Charlotte is the one that's kidnapped and killed and is remade, and that memory has been modified. So some people thought Sammy isn't even real, right? Like this was fully a created thing so Charlotte could put her trauma onto something else. I don't think that's true, mainly because of what we see later in the Silver Eyes trilogy, when William's kind of like going crazy and building Charlotte, his sister, I think it's like Aunt Jane, or no, I think Aunt Jane's from FNAF movie. Charlotte's aunt essentially is like, hey, Henry, drop this. You have a living son and a wife, and they're going to leave you if you don't stop obsessing over this. And he doesn't stop obsessing over this, and they do. Henry's wife leaves and takes Sammy with her. Man, I'm so tired of fighting to stay awake. I can feel it in my eyes. It's one of those it's one of those tireds where it's like, so yesterday was our youngest son's first birthday. Went great. He had a blast. Our toddler had a blast. Everyone who we invited came, which like never happens. It was a fun time, great food, great friends, just pool, water stuff, because it was like 80 degrees all day. But man, setting up that party, hosting the party that had like 6 kids in it that I had to make sure were like safe and play with them and, have a good time with that. And then taking down the party, I am exhausted today. I am so tired. My body is sore. My eyes are that kind of tired where it's just like they feel sunken. And it's not like it hurts to keep them open, but it's hard to keep them open because they just want to be like this. This is my most comfortable state right now. But like, if I do this, I'm going to fall asleep. So the eyes need to stay at least a little open. I'm just saying, thank God. Now, I'm recording this as of Monday. This week's video I recorded last week. Thank God I did, because I'm not at an energy level to record a main channel video. These podcasts are more laid back. I can relax a bit. I mean, last week I literally reclined for half the podcast. I don't need to use like a projecting voice where I'm really energetic about. I can just kind of vibe and chill. So, excuse me. So that being said, like thank God I'm just recording a podcast today because I don't have the energy to record anything else. And speaking of laid back, I made a post. We will get back to this question, but I made a post. I'm reclining. I said recline my body. Was like, good idea. I made a post talking about how a lot of the channels I follow and subscribe to have been making compilation channels, and all kind of with the idea of like, you put these on to fall asleep to study to, this is background noise. And they take their videos, edit out the intros and outros, and then like snip out really loud bits or sponsored segments. So it's just the content as a compilation. Enjoy and just put it on in the background, go to sleep to it, whatever you want to do. And I asked, like, do you guys want me to do this? And it's been an overwhelming yes. So I'm working on that in the background. The channel has been made. Its branding is not complete yet. I'm working with Barbadroid to get like a profile picture and a banner and stuff like that. I don't know how frequently I'll release videos on it, because like, you got to think, I make 10 to 20 minute videos every week. If I want to make a compilation of those videos, that's like an hour and a half, 2 hours, that's going to be 4, 5, 6 videos. So if I release them weekly, I'm going to run out of videos very fast. So I think I'm going to release them monthly. I think makes the most sense, only because if I release them any more than that, I will eventually run out of videos to use for the compilations. And I don't want to reuse videos, you know, like once I use a video, I don't want to use it again later, unless I like combine them in different ways. But I don't know. It feels weird. So I think I'll release them monthly. And like I said, the channel's made. I mean, hey, it's a pun on Rye Toast. So if you can find it, it's an unbranded channel with no profile picture, but the name is done. So good luck finding it if you can. It does link back to this channel, so I guess that's your other hint. But I assume by the end of the, it's the 27th. Probably by the end of June, that channel will be up and running. But yeah, I just, while I was on the topic, I'm like, I probably should announce that I'm doing that. But back to this question from Sabbath. Yeah. So Sammy Emily exists in the books. No evidence whatsoever that he exists in the games. That being said, basically Henry's wife leaves him and takes the kid. So there is a possibility there's some universe where Sammy comes back into the narrative, especially if like he's grown now, you know, like if he was 3 in the early 80s, then by the time of Security Breach, he's like 40. So it could just be coming back into the narrative being like, okay, I'm an adult. I don't know this half of my life that seems tragic. I want to learn more. And he goes learning about like Henry and Charlotte and Fazbear and William and all that. There's a non-zero chance that the CEO of Fazbear is Sammy Emily. Do I think it's true? No, I think it's not true. But it's funny to say. Yeah, if they want to introduce a new character that's connected, Sammy is a perfect opportunity to do that. But I don't see any evidence whatsoever for that to be true as of right now. So, but thank you for your question. Our next one comes from Morgan, she, they. If this sister location bunker is underneath the FNAF 4 house and was really just an experiment bunker, who were the technicians you find dead later in the game? Do you think they were real technicians hired by William? Why didn't Ennard just use one of those corpses to escape instead of waiting for Michael? Yeah, it's such a weird footnote for sister location that there are real engineers that get sent down there during the day to do their job. And then Michael goes down there at night to do other stuff. That is weird. But to be fair, I do think the sister location bunker is elsewhere connected to another building. I don't think the only entrance is through the FNAF 4 house. So that being said, the idea that there are other engineers working there during the day does in some way make sense. As far as the other half of your question, I think that's important. Why didn't Ennard use one of their corpses to escape instead of waiting for Michael? I think it specifically comes down to the scooper. The scooper is such a delicate and intricate device that, like, not delicate, that's not the right word. The scooper is such a specific device that it seems like it works best on something that is holding still and in the right location. And if they wanted to use the scooper on somebody's body to get their insides out and go inside of them, they would also want that body to look presentable. So they need somebody to go there willingly so they can trick it. The engineers, I don't think, would have done that. Not to mention, if they kill the engineers, then they most likely maimed them in some way and were then not able to use their bodies. So I think it comes down to the fact that they were able to trick Michael into going into the scooping room and then were able to have a mostly intact outer body to use. But that's my thinking for that. But thank you for your question. And our last question comes from Sylph and y'all. Have you played or do you plan to play Indigo Park by Unique Geese? If so, will you be uploading a playthrough on your second channel? Are you planning or currently working on a theory about the game? Thank you for your question. So I've played through the game twice on the main channel live. So you can find the live streams on the, when you go to the channel page, there's tabs. There's like videos, shorts, live. If you click live, all my VODs stay public. So you should be able to see my initial playthrough of Indigo Park and the blind one I did last week, like the blindfolded one. So yes, I have played Indigo Park. It's really, really good. Highly recommended. Now, are you planning or currently working on a theory about the game? That is no. As much as I want to, and Indigo Park is very like, so this is going to be a business talk real quick. I can realistically, if I want a video to do well on this channel, I either have to talk about FNAF or I have to talk about a trending indie horror game. Indigo Park does fit trending indie horror game. So I think I could have gotten away with a theory like the week it came out or the week after. I didn't do that. I don't know if I do an Indigo Park theory, if it will land, like algorithm-wise. And peek behind the curtain, there's a little bit of a lull in the FNAF fandom right now because nothing's really coming out. So the videos are, underperforming a little bit compared to last year on the main channel. So I can't really afford to risk like a non-FNAF video that might flop. If I have a big flop right now, that's really going to set me back financially. So I'm not comfortable, risking that on a non-FNAF game right now. There is a second reason. As Indigo Park stands with just chapter 1, I don't know what I could add to the lore without just speculation. Like doing a theory about Indigo Park. Because I feel like with just chapter 1, there isn't quite enough for me to cover to make a compelling theory. Maybe when chapter 2 comes out and they because chapter 2 will be like, it'll have a budget, it'll be grander in scope, presumably grander in lore. I would love to make content about Indigo Park because I do really, really enjoy that game and the characters it creates. I think Mason and the team knocked it out of the park with that game. I'm really excited to see what they do have next. The voice actors were amazing. The songs, like the music in game and the song at the end were amazing. So it's genuinely a fantastic game. But as far as like the lore of that game, if I were to make a main channel theory, it would probably be like, okay, where's the game going from here? And that's pure speculation. Because if I can't really make a theory like, who's the player? Because all we know is like, okay, the player was a kid who went to Indigo Park and liked Indigo Park and is now going back, presumably as like a ghost hunter YouTuber. Because the conversation at the beginning of the game is on the screen is like, hey, I want to go record. You coming with me? I don't know. You go ahead without me or whatever. And he's going presumably to like be some kind of ghost hunter YouTuber or something like that. I'm not sure, like there is speculation there, but like, that's it. I don't think I could make like a 15-minute video about the lore of Indigo Park without just speculating with no basis. And at that point, what's the point? So I think I'll maybe when chapter 2 comes out, because that'll be like a year from now, I'll be a bit more established. Hopefully this channel will be a bit less FNAF centric by then. I would love to do an Indigo Park lore video. Until then, I don't know. But thank you for your questions, Soph. And I think that's all the questions I've got for today. So again, if you have any questions for the podcast, you can send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. That is in the description to copy and paste because it's pain to type. But until next time, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.